The Pittsburgh Penguins have parted ways with head coach Mike Sullivan, and it would be kind of shocking if he's not the next Boston Bruins bench boss.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Monday, April 28th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to amazon.com/firetv-locked-on to learn more. On today's episode, we are going to discuss this morning's news that the Pittsburgh Penguins have parted ways with head coach Mike Sullivan and discuss the pros and cons of him becoming the next Boston Bruins head coach, with Joe Sacco as interim still in the mix, but Mike Sullivan, in my mind, automatically jumps up to the top of the list. So we'll discuss why the Penguins parted ways with him and the pros and cons of the Bruins bringing him back. You can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. I've been covering this team for various outlets for 20 years. I was a full-time hockey news writer for thescore.com for 5 years. And I have been hosting this podcast since 2019. So the Bruins are in the midst of a head coach search. And one of the candidates is certainly Mike Sullivan. And that was even before he was let go this morning by the Pittsburgh Penguins. Not necessarily let go. They described it as a parting of ways. And Sullivan had 2 years remaining on his contract with the Penguins. So you can bet that he's banking on getting back into the coaching ranks right away, because he's leaving that couple of years on the table by this kind of mutual decision. General manager and team president Kyle Dubas said, on behalf of Fenway Sports Group and the Penguins organization, I would like to thank Mike Sullivan for his unwavering commitment and loyalty to the team and city of Pittsburgh over the past decade. I'll insert a note here that he was the, I believe, second longest tenured head coach in the NHL, behind only John Cooper of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Mike is known, Dubas continued, for his preparation, focus, and fierce competitiveness. Fortunate to have a front row seat to his dedication to this franchise for the past 2 seasons. He will forever be an enormous part of Penguins history, not only for the impressive back-to-back cups, his impact on the core of Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, and Brian Rust, but more importantly for his love and loyalty to the organization. Not a decision that was taken lightly, but the Penguins are in a bit of a transition period, and they felt it was the best course moving forward for the franchise. Now, Sullivan was the AHL head coach in the Pittsburgh organization before being given the NHL job in December of 2015. He led the team to back-to-back Stanley Cup championships in 2016 and 2017. 409 wins with the Penguins make him the all-time leader and just the 14th coach in NHL history to win 400 games with just one team. And of course, on top of that, back-to-back Stanley Cup champion win, the Pittsburgh Penguins have obviously been one of the top teams in the organization. They finished third, and first, and third, as well as second in the Metropolitan Division following those cup wins. The past couple of seasons, they've taken a bit of a dip, haven't made the playoffs since 2022. And I guess it was deemed that there was a need for a change of voice behind the bench as Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang move into their final years in the NHL. And as they try to get back to competitiveness with that core, but also moving forward, trying to build a new team concept. And of course, the Pittsburgh Penguins job wasn't his first stint as an NHL head coach. He did coach the Bruins for 2 seasons from 2003-04. There was the lockout season, and then he came back for the next season. In 2003-2004, the Bruins finished first that year, and that, of course, was a season in which they went all in, acquiring Sergei Gonchar, Michael Nylander. They had one of the best players in the NHL in Joe Thornton. That was a team that was built to win. They did lose in the first round, largely due to the fact that Joe Thornton had suffered a rib injury and was very ineffective in that series. I think he actually had broken ribs. They came out of the lockout and stumbled to a record of 29, 37, and 16. And then he was let go by the Bruins. And they, of course, moved on to bigger and better things without Mike Sullivan at the helm. But he should be lauded for the work that he did in 2003 and 2004. That was a very productive and big season for the Boston Bruins, despite the fact they did lose in the playoffs. Sullivan was then replaced by Dave Lewis, who only lasted 1 season. And then, of course, we had Claude Julien, Stanley Cup champion, Jack Adams Award winner, Bruce Cassidy, Stanley Cup finalist, Jack Adams Award winner, Jim Montgomery, Jack Adams Award winner, and led the team to the best record in NHL history. Enter interim head coach Joe Sacco. And now we have a vacancy that could be primed for a return for Mike Sullivan. We'll discuss the pros and cons of hiring Mike Sullivan here as the podcast continues. Have you checked your bank accounts and ever wondered where in the world has all my money gone? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, even plan long-term goals. And managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Boston Bruins part of your daily routine. Everydayers have it locked in with a subscription on their favorite podcast apps as well as on YouTube. If you are watching on video, please hit that bell button so that you are notified when a new episode drops. And also click like and drop a comment on whether or not you are into the idea of Mike Sullivan jumping on as Boston Bruins head coach. Today, of course, we're talking about the decision by the Pittsburgh Penguins to part ways with Mike Sullivan. He had a very successful run with the Penguins over the past decade, kind of the same run that Don Sweeney has had as general manager. He, of course, is a 2-time Stanley Cup winner with the Penguins and a former Boston Bruins head coach, guiding the team to a very successful season in 2003, 2004. He was hired by then general manager Mike O'Connell. They had 104 points, first place finish in the Northeast, but they were eliminated by the Canadiens in the first round. After the lockout, the Bruins struggled to win in the new NHL. Joe Thornton was traded, of course, to the San Jose Sharks, so that didn't help at all. Then Peter Chiarelli came in. Sullivan was let go, and then Dave Lewis came in, and the rest is history. He served as an assistant for the U.S. Olympic hockey team at the 2006 Winter Olympics in Italy. He jumped on as an assistant coach of the Tampa Bay Lightning, promoted to associate coach the following season. Then in 2009, he was an assistant coach for the Rangers. 2013, named assistant coach for the Canucks. And then he served as interim head coach of the Canucks while head coach John Tortorella, another possible Boston Bruins candidate, served a 6-game suspension. Then he was relieved of his duties, joined the Blackhawks as a player development coach, then joined the Penguins as their AHL coach, and was again promoted to that job in December of 2015, a position he has held up until today. So what are the pros and the cons of hiring Mike Sullivan? Well, obviously he has a proven track record, an impressive coaching resume, assistant, associate with various successful NHL teams, as well as, of course, the back-to-back Stanley Cup victories with the Penguins in 2016 and 2017. 409 wins with the Penguins, setting a franchise record. He also was recently the head coach of Team USA at the Four Nations Face-Off, which speaks to his reputation, not only around the NHL, but kind of on the international level as well. That kind of experience could reinstill a winning culture within a Bruins organization that he's already somewhat familiar with. Again, he started as a head coach with the Boston Bruins and perhaps didn't get a fair shake navigating the transition from pre to post lockout, different NHL coming out of it, and of course being left without his star player in Joe Thornton with that ridiculous trade made by then general manager Mike O'Connell. Now, you can argue as well, another pro, his offensive system is suited to the Bruins' evolving roster. Mike Sullivan is known for emphasizing speed and creativity, and his offensive approach aligns with some of the Bruins' recent roster adjustments. Remember, they traded Brandon Carlo, Charlie Coyle, Brad Marchand, Trent Frederick, Justin Brazeau, and they acquired some more speedy skaters like Casey Middlestat, Marat Hudnustidov, and this suggests a shift towards a more dynamic playing style, which Sullivan's system could effectively harness. He's been using guys like Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Erik Karlsson, Brian Rust, Jake Gensel before him. All these guys that have thrived under Sullivan, and that's the kind of offensive creativity that Don Sweeney was preaching in last week's end of the year presser. They want to maintain that defensive structure and discipline, but they also want to evolve offensively. Now, look, you can argue that the Penguins obviously took some steps back over the last few years, and I believe they were the only team in the NHL this season with a worse goal differential than the Bruins. That's partly roster makeup, goaltending, which hasn't been particularly strong for that team since Marc-Andre Fleury left, since Matt Murray's heyday. He was of course, Stanley Cup champion winning goaltender for that team. But still, his offensive system is well suited to the Bruins' evolving roster. Middlestat, Hudnutdinov, Fabian Lysell, probably Matt Poitras coming up. These are guys that could flourish under Mike Sullivan. As I mentioned, he's obviously already familiar with Boston and the environment there. He is a local from the Boston area or Massachusetts native, BU alumni. He has deep roots in the area, has experience in the organization, and this could facilitate a pretty seamless integration into the Bruins culture. His previous coaching stint with the Bruins, and of course, a familial connection to defenseman Charlie McAvoy further strengthen this bond. McAvoy, of course, is Sullivan's daughter-in-law, and Kylie McAvoy just recently welcomed their first son into the world. So in addition to Otto, the dog, Sullivan has ample reason to relocate to Boston so that he can be closer to his daughter, his grandson, his son-in-law. Yes, there's some questions. We'll touch on this in the cons about, maybe that's too close for comfort, mixing family and head coaching. But I mean, let's be honest, there are these kind of connections all over the hockey world, maybe not as close, but still, there's a lot of close connections around the hockey world. And I don't think it would be that detrimental to have Sullivan, McAvoy working together as leaders. McAvoy would likely have at least an A, and he and Sullivan likely on the same page to begin. Of course, there could be some tension that arises along the way if things don't go as the Bruins hope. But again, you can't discount the reality that family is hugely important. McAvoy just went through this big health scare as well with the injury at the Four Nations face-off, the ensuing infection. It's probably a reminder to everybody in the organization and in the McAvoy sphere that family is incredibly important. And would Sullivan want to go to Anaheim, take that head coaching job when your family's right there in Boston where you're from? If the Bruins offer it, it would be very hard to turn that down. And it's just special to play with someone that you're that close to. And that was something that McAvoy and Sullivan were both looking forward to as part of the Four Nations tournament, where Sullivan, as I mentioned, the head coach of that team, they had a very strong run that was ultimately ended by Team Canada. But you could tell McAvoy was fired up for the previous game against Canada, which he probably shouldn't have played in. We've discussed that before. Everydayers will remember. But Sullivan's leadership of Team USA in the Four Nations tournament showcased his ability to make strategic adjustments under pressure. His proactive line and defensive pair changes were instrumental in the team's success, reflecting a flexible coaching style. You could argue that maybe that was to their detriment by scratching Kyle Connor for the final game, but can't argue with the success that Team USA had. And the first win over Team Canada was obviously incredibly impressive. So those are some cons of hiring Mike Sullivan. Proven track record, two-time Stanley Cup champion. Those don't become available very often. Of course, there is another multi-Stanley Cup winner available in Joel Quenneville, but we're staying far away from him. Other than that, there isn't one available with his resume and track record. His system could be well suited to the Bruins' evolving roster. And his familiarity with Boston is, of course, a huge bonus as well. Now, on the flip side, there are some cons to hiring Mike Sullivan, and we'll discuss those here as the podcast continues. If you're looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious, well, crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better-for-you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. My kid is actually a big fan of these. He was at a basketball tournament this weekend, and Wonderful Pistachios was a great way for him to stay fueled up for the 4 games that he played over the weekend. I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack, whether you're behind your desk or on a road trip. But if you love cracking open every shell, that satisfying crunch is available with the in-shell options, which are a classic favorite. Get snacking, get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, let's discuss some cons to hiring Mike Sullivan. He is, of course, one of several candidates that the Boston Bruins will look at. The Bruins are also one of several vacancies that Mike Sullivan could consider as well. And Kevin Weeks on X this morning saying that per conversations with several team owners, executives, and coaches, Sullivan can reset the coach's compensation market. He could get to or eclipse the high watermark of $7 million per season. So not only will a bunch of teams be interested, but some team that you may not expect could jump in and offer him more money than perhaps the Bruins are willing to offer him. Here are some cons to hiring Mike Sullivan. We don't really care about the money that you spend on a head coach. It's not cap related, and the Bruins are not a poor franchise, so they should be spending as much as they can to improve the club. Whether or not you believe Sullivan is the man for the job, that remains to be seen. And of course, you can't talk about Sullivan's Stanley Cup wins without mentioning the fact that they missed the playoffs for the past 3 seasons, and that's still with Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang playing at high levels, the emergence of Brian Rust as a star winger, the addition of Erik Karlsson. Critics rightly argue that his system became less effective as these players got older and the team underperformed greatly over the last 3 years. Like, Sidney Crosby should be competing still for the Stanley Cup at this point in his career. You look at what Alex Ovechkin is doing at the Washington Capitals. Crosby still playing at an elite level, and the Penguins were not able to get it done. Now, similar to Boston, you can argue that it's more a roster composition issue than coaching, and Kyle Dubas not able to put the right pieces around these guys. Trading Jake Gensel, who was a big part of this team, giving Tristan Jarry a contract extension, pretty unwarranted. There's real questions there, but there is the argument out there that the underperformance was perhaps tied to Sullivan's inability to get the most out of that group. He's also faced scrutiny for favoring some veteran players over developing younger talent, which, I mean, it's kind of fair. You're going to rely on Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Karlsson if you're kind of fighting for your job and trying to stay in the playoff mix. This could conflict with the Bruins' need to nurture those emerging players that I mentioned earlier, maybe hindering their long-term growth. Don Sweeney already said they're not going to hand roles to younger players. They have to earn them. And if Sullivan is given that mandate, then not giving Matt Poitras, Fabian Lysell an opportunity to grow and thrive could be to the Bruins' detriment and to their development's detriment as well. The Bruins have also historically valued toughness and physicality. That was something I was planning to talk about today, so everydayers, keep an eye out for this. We're going to discuss whether or not the Bruins should kind of move past that need to have everybody be defensive dynamo, playing 200-foot games, physical, etc. Sullivan's preference is for a speed-oriented game, which may not align with this identity. The Bruins' identity still tied to the likes of Nikita Zadorov Elias Lindholm, not necessarily known for their speed. This could lead to possible friction between coaching philosophy and team culture. Don Sweeney and Mike Sullivan and Cam Neely would have to make sure that they are on the same page before a deal is reached. And again, Sweeney was preaching offensive evolution, so maybe this is exactly what they need with Sullivan coming in. Now, let's be clear with that. It's not like he was reinventing the wheel or that the Penguins were like this juggernaut over the last few seasons, but in their successful heyday, they were, of course, not known for like a shutdown team, but they could take it right to you and score. Obviously, it helps to have elite players like they've had. But the Bruins have David Pastrnak. Charlie McAvoy could take another level in his development. As a con, though, that could be something that people point to. Sullivan's familial tie to McAvoy could raise questions about impartiality, team dynamics. Could it affect the locker room dynamics? Could it lead to perceptions of nepotism, favoritism? Could it affect team cohesion? Like if Sullivan comes in and hands McAvoy the C, would David Pastrnak resent that? Would newcomers like Zadorov and Lindholm feel shafted because they didn't maybe get a fair shake? Those are real questions to be asked about Sullivan coming on as the potential head coach of the Boston Bruins. There's also the argument against bringing in a retread head coach, someone who's been around for a while. The NHL has a reputation for recycling head coaches, and maybe it's better to give a guy like Jay Leach the opportunity, or Ryan Muganel, or somebody from David Carl, University of Denver, although it looks like he's going to stay there, Jay Pandolfo. Maybe it would be better to give one of those guys an opportunity instead of giving the job to a guy who has had diminishing returns over the last few years, who hasn't made the playoffs in a few years, and who is the father-in-law of one of your top players. So that is kind of the argument against hiring Mike Sullivan. Pierre LeBrun adding Sullivan was in year one of a 3-year extension, which paid him around $5.5 million. He'll be in high demand, LeBrun says. Rangers and Bruins especially jump out as possibilities. He has the ties with the Rangers and, of course, with the Bruins, as we've discussed. And perhaps how they figure out the rest of the contract with Pittsburgh will be interesting. Maybe it's not a matter of him leaving that money on the table. If the Penguins are still going to be paying him, maybe another team comes in and just kind of prorates it. Who knows? But that's a discussion for another day if and when he is hired. So Mike Sullivan let go by the Pittsburgh Penguins. They part ways. We discussed the pros and the cons of hiring Mike Sullivan. And this, of course, will be a conversation we carry on here as the Bruins undergo their search for the next head coach. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. I hope you all had a great weekend. I was down in Niagara Falls for my kids' end of the year basketball tournament. They went 1-3, which was unfortunate, but he played really well. And more importantly, they had a lot of fun. We stayed at a water park and just had a lot of fun hanging around there with the team and with his brothers. Coming up this week, we're going to bring you all the latest on the Boston Bruins. So please continue to make it your first listen of the day, even though they're out of the playoffs or not in the playoff picture this year. To get caught up on that, you're going to want to make Locked On Game Night your second listen. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. You can find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. That, along with Locked On Boston Bruins, is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. Happy Monday. Canada. Get out there and vote. And we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.